Welcome to the Living in Naples channel. I'm James Headley. Thanks for tuning in today. In my previous professional life, I had the pleasure of working with a visionary serial entrepreneur. And one of his interesting perspectives that struck me then and stuck with me was his characterization of contracts as sales and marketing tools first and foremost, and legal documents a very distant second. While I'm not going to downplay or not intending to downplay or understate the legal importance of a home purchase contract, I want to spend some time today discussing the different versions of sales contracts we can choose among in Southwest Florida, particularly those elements that buyers should understand and potentially consider as leverage points when making an offer on a new home. As always, I appreciate you tuning in, liking, subscribing, and sharing the channel. And with that, let's dive right into a discussion of contracts with the caveat that, of course, I am not an attorney, so definitely do not take any of this as legal advice. We'll certainly connect you with an attorney for closing if you prefer. A title company can also close in the state of Florida, so we can use a title company, and they generally have attorneys on retainers, so you're getting them along the way indirectly as well. Or consult your personal attorney, and definitely read the contract so that you don't have any surprises there. They're regardless of the form, they're lengthy, but they also are governing many hundreds of thousands into the millions of dollars in purchase, so it's worth your time to have a look. And I can advise you big picture, but again, not from a legal perspective, but more from a real estate perspective. So with that said, there are two primary types of contract, or at least originators of contracts, that we might use when making an offer on a home in Southwest Florida for you. One of those is the FAR, that's the Florida Realtors contract. The other is the neighbor contract, and that's the Naples Area Board of Realtors contract. We'll focus more on the latter today, but the provisions across these contracts are fairly similar. I should say very similar, really. They're all going to address, obviously, the big issues that might come up along the way, and just address them in different ways, different portions of the contract, touching on different aspects. But everything I'm going to talk about today can be addressed in both, or is addressed in both. Just a matter of where that is handled and how it's particularly handled. We will tend to focus on using, and if we have our choice, we'll use the neighbor contract to make an offer for you. That contract just has more of the local issues and items that have come up along the way, trying to look around corners and make sure that we get to the closing table and have a successful closing, which ultimately is the purpose of having a sales agreement in place and a sales contract. So those are the two. If you hear about the neighbor contract versus the FAR contract, just know that it's where they're originating from. But again, these aspects are all covered really in both. So that takes us then to, there are separate versions of those contracts, one being an as-is version of the contract versus the standard contract. And there's the key distinction here between these two contracts, and it's a really strategic decision for us as to which we'll use if the seller hasn't specified one or the other as what they're looking to use. But the biggest difference is there is a general presumption, if you will, that in the as-is contract, the seller is less likely to undertake any post-inspection remediation. So as the name implies, it's the house is being sold as is. So you should not expect going in that the seller is going to be undertaking a lot of repairs, regardless of what comes back in the various inspections that we might choose to go forward with. That said, it is not a 100% ironclad that the seller will not undertake some remediation. It's just the sort of general assumption and tenor of things going in. So be aware of that, and everything's negotiable, of course. Related to that, it comes down to timeline as well, and how that works with the inspection and what we do from at the point of inspection and post inspection. In the as-is contract, You have a period of due diligence. Undertake any inspections that you would like during that time, and then again can negotiate to try to see if the seller is willing to do any remediation. Again, they're not required to do so, but during that due diligence period, you can back out of the contract, cancel the contract for any reason at all whatsoever, inspection related or otherwise, change your mind, whatever. During that period, you would not be putting any of your earnest money deposit at risk. So that is the as-is contract has that due diligence period when you've essentially entered into an option to purchase, if you want to think about it that way. It's not quite the same, but that's useful oftentimes to think about it in that context. In the more standard contract, the idea is that, and the terminology is such that you find items that are defects in the home during the inspection phase. You present those to the seller as a request for them to handle them. The seller can then come back and say that they will handle all of them. If they do so, you are locked in. If they've agreed to and they execute on addressing all of those defects, the contract is ironclad in that respect. It will go to closing. So your earnest money is at risk. If the seller can come back and say they'll only fix A, B, and C, but not D and E, or they'll offer you a monetary number that in lieu of them actually undertaking the defects. If either of those latter two items are processes or what the seller elects to come back to you with, and you do not want to accept that, then at that point, just as under the due diligence phase in the as-is contract, you can cancel the contract and receive all of your earnest money deposit back. Excuse me. So, key distinction there. What happens in inspections? When are you locked in fully? When is your earnest money committed? Is a key distinction between those two. Having said that, as we look at other contracts and either of these contract forms, some other things to be aware of, and particularly if you are a remote buyer, things that we can use to leverage. First of all, in either of those contract forms that I just discussed, as a remote buyer, we might want to favor one versus the other, just depending upon how comfortable you feel with going forward if the repairs aren't undertaken, how comfortable you feel with the home if you haven't seen it perhaps, but you've seen it through us doing a video tour, from prior visits, sort of the area, et cetera, and you feel quite comfortable. Either contract form might work. If it's more of a sort of a blind purchase, if you will, then maybe we want to go with the as-is contract so that you are completely in the clear to cancel the contract for any reason whatsoever if we're just so off the mark. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Generally it does not, but in terms of identifying a home, but might want to lean that way. Some of the other key elements and clauses in the contract to think about and ways to leverage them to your advantage as a buyer, and sort of know what sellers might be looking for so that you can give them what they want in a negotiation without giving away too much. One would be the time to close. What's the closing date going to be? Your flexibility on that is going to be a positive for sellers. Generally, sellers are looking for a quick time to close. They're looking to sell the house. They want to be out of that house and have their proceeds in hand quickly. But that's not always the case. Sometimes there's a situation where a seller might want to or need to be in a home for a few months as they transition to wherever it is they're going from that particular home to. So flexibility on your part there, but being ready to close quickly with the flexibility to extend to a little lengthier period is generally going to be a positive for you. I should mention price first, but price is price, and we talk a lot about that elsewhere, and can get into discussions one-to-one about what the right price is, what sort of pricing might be necessary to secure a home, depending upon what the market conditions are, et cetera. Moving beyond that, due diligence or inspection period. We've talked a bit about that in terms of the forms, but also sort of what's that timeline look like? Do you need, can we do this on a 7-day due diligence period? If you can fly down, if it is a case of a remote situation, we'll get the inspection scheduled right away. You fly down, maybe have a look at the home concurrent with the inspections going on, and we can turn around the requests for repairs all within that 7-day period. That's great. 2 weeks is not all that uncommon. 10 days, 10 to 14 days, anywhere in there. Again, all negotiable, but know from a seller perspective, a shorter due diligence or inspection period is going to be more favorable to them, because then the house isn't off the market sitting as a pending sale during that entire period, with the risk that you might cancel the contract. So a shorter period is better from their perspective. And then lastly, contingencies. Are there contingencies that you're going to need to introduce into the contract beyond the standard contract, and how are those going to be received? A big one that we often run into is the case of a contingency on the sale of the buyer's current home. If that's the case, just know that you're putting the seller's taking that house off the market, putting it at risk. That the sale of your current home doesn't go through. Perhaps it also includes a lengthier time to close as we wait for your home to close in wherever you may be. Excuse me. It can be, we can massage this in as many ways as possible to put you in the strongest position. I.e., if your house isn't already on the market, you want to get the house on the market. Ideally, your house is under contract. And past all of the respective due diligence / inspection periods in your particular state, past all of those contingencies that may be in your current contract, or hopefully there aren't any. The cleaner the contract, the farther along it is on your end, the less likely that a contingency like that is going to be seen as a negative or much of a negative by a seller. But just an example, we want to make sure that we're putting you in the best possible position. So just be aware of those types of things, and that is any contingencies in the contract are going to be key elements to think about as to how they may strengthen or weaken your particular offer. I hope this was helpful to you. Obviously, again, not an attorney, but can talk with you about how this works from a negotiating perspective and a sales and marketing perspective anytime, and look forward to hopefully writing a contract with you on your dream home in Southwest Florida. So please do reach out and get in touch, and we can talk about your particular circumstances at your convenience. Until then, I appreciate you liking, subscribing, and sharing, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Take care.